Okay, so for this next part, we're talking about an additional property called zeros. So an additional property of the graph, where the graph crosses the x-axis, we call those zeros. The zeros of a function f of x are the x values that make f of x equal to 0. In other words, so say for example, we're taking a look at letter A, we're going to solve for the x values that make this equation true. So we need to come up with x values that make that when we plug it in, we end up getting 0. Now, for this type of problem, you might have to think back to Algebra 2. We're going to do some factoring. Now, we're going to break it up into two separate groups. These first terms are the terms that have to multiply to the 3x squared. The easiest way to do that will make one of them 3x and the other one x. Now, these other terms, they're going to have to multiply to negative 10, but they're not going to add to that 1 in that middle that we saw there. It's not quite like x plus blank, x plus blank. We have a coefficient of 3 in front of one of them. So what we need to do is we need to come up with values that when we multiply them together, we get negative 10. But more importantly, when we multiply this times, or the 3x times the last one, plus that blank times x, together they need to add up to positive 1x. Now, this one might take some guessing and checking. So let's say, for example, we need two numbers that multiply to negative 10, and we try negative 2 and positive 5. Well, if I take those two, negative 2 and positive 5, pardon me, and if I do this 3x times that positive 5, that gives me 15x. If I do negative 2 times positive x, we end up with negative 2x. When we add negative 2x plus that 15x, we get 13x. So not quite what we're looking for. We're looking for, again, just 1x. So let's try another one. And for time's sake, I'm going to just kind of jump to the one that I happen to know works. So we're going to try negative 5 and positive 2. Because negative 5 times positive 2 will give us negative 10. Checking this out, we got negative 5 times x in the middle here, giving us negative 5x. On the outer parts, we got 3x times 2, which would give us 6x. So when we add those together, that's going to give us that 1x that we were looking for there. So now that we have this broken down, I'm going to rewrite this just so we have a little bit more room to work. We got 3x minus 5 times x plus 2. And that, when those are all multiplied together, we get 0. Now, the zero product property says if we have one thing times another, then either that first thing has to be equal to 0, or the second thing has to be equal to 0. This is the zero product property. So you have, anytime you have a bunch of multiplications going on, or at least one multiplication going on equal to 0, then one of those factors must be equal to 0. So let's set each of those equal to 0. For the one on the left, 3x minus 5 equals 0. Let's add 5 to both sides, and we end up with 3x equals 5. Keep solving for x. We're going to divide both sides by 3, and we end up with x equals 5 over 3. Fractions are our friends, because otherwise it's 1.6 repeated forever, and then where do you know, where should you stop when you're rounding, and I don't know. Just 5/3. It's a little cleaner. The other one's going to be even easier. X plus 2 equals 0, we're going to subtract 2, we end up with x equals negative 2. So that way, if you go back and plug either these 5/3 or that negative 2 back into the original equation, you will end up with an output of 0. Now the next one's a little different because there's not a whole lot of x terms going on. We're going to set them both, or set it equal to 0 again. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking. So we have 0 equals 10 minus x squared. To start solving for x, we're going to take both sides and square, because we got to get rid of that outer square root. So we have 0 squared, which is, well, still 0. On the other side, we have 10 minus x squared. A couple different options you have here. Either you can leave the negative x on that side, but personally, I prefer getting a positive x squared. So we end up with x squared equals 10. Now to solve for x, get it all by itself, we again take the square root. So earlier we squared it to get rid of a square root. Now we're going to take the square root to get rid of a square. I'd said a lot of words there. We got x equals, the square root of 10 is not a nice number, so we're going to leave it as the square root of 10. You'll notice I left a blank there. Whenever you insert the square root in order to solve an equation, when you insert it in, you're going to get a positive output and a negative output. There's two possible outputs. Last one on this page. Again, setting it equal to 0. So we got 0 equals 2t minus 3. That was a weird looking 3. Let's try that again. Over t plus 5. Now the best way to go about solving this is, well, we got a fraction here. Let's multiply both sides by t plus 5. When we multiply both sides by t plus 5, the t plus 5's over here cancel out. On the left side, we're left with t plus 5 times 0. Well, anything times 0 is 0. That's kind of nice. Equals 2t minus 3. Keep going. We'll add 3 to both sides. We end up with 3 equals 2t. And then solving for t, again, divide both sides by 2. And we, pardon me, we end up with 3 over 2 equals t. That is the 0 on that graph.